My name is Amber Mon. I was 31 years old the night this started. The night my father ate A5 Wagyu with 4 men at a window table. I was buying groceries off the yellow sticker shelf, the things that expire tomorrow. Both meals came out of the same paycheck. Mine. He forgot his coat. He texted me 6 words. Bring my coat. Don't come in. 34 degrees, 2 buses, 52 minutes. The outer door was locked, so I came in. And he was already on his feet before I reached the table, telling the room to get a poor loser like me out of his restaurant. I laid the coat on the empty chair. I left. The bill was $1,216. In the breast pocket was the itemized check the restaurant had mailed to my old billing address after his payment failed. They didn't know that, and I didn't know yet what those 3 words in his text were really protecting. For 2 years I thought he was ashamed of me. I was wrong, and being wrong is what saved me. Ors, here's what I did on the bus home. 11 minutes, 3 things. I called the bank and closed the credit card account in my name. Not frozen, closed. The woman on the phone asked if I was sure because my father was an authorized user, and I said, yes, that's the point. I canceled the automatic payment on his club dues. Then I typed 14 words and sent them. The card is closed. The coat is yours. So is the bill. He reached the Brookline house at 11:10 that night and started shouting into the living room. I know because a neighbor told me later. By then, I'd been gone 2 hours, everything I kept fit in one canvas bag, and I have never once wished it had fit in less. 25 months later, he came to claim 40% of something I'd built out of $612 and a folding table. He gave me a deadline, Wednesday, 7 o'clock. And he picked the location himself because he thought the location was a threat. He was right that it meant something. He was wrong about what. But none of this starts in a restaurant. It starts in March of 2019 at my mother's funeral with a man in a wool coat giving a eulogy about himself. My mother's name was Colleen. She was 59. She worked in the billing office of a dental group for 19 years and balanced her own checkbook by hand until the week she went into hospice. At the funeral, my father spoke for 11 minutes. I timed it. Not on purpose. I was holding my phone because I'd been fielding calls from the caterer, and I looked down and the stopwatch was running, and I let it run. 8 of those minutes were about him. What he had given up for her, the promotions he'd let go by, how a man in his position has to make choices, and how she had understood that, and how she had never once complained. She complained, quietly, to me, in the car, for 20 years. But she was dead, and he was standing up front, and the dead don't get a rebuttal. He wore the wool coat. I bought him that coat in 2018 with my first performance bonus, $1,900, and I spent a fifth of it on a charcoal wool overcoat because he'd said twice that a man is judged in the first 4 seconds. I ate boxed noodles for 2 weeks. I remember being proud of that. Not proud that I could afford it, proud that I had sacrificed for it. That's the part I want you to hear. At 26, I already believed love was something you paid for in advance. After the service, he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "You did good today. You've always been the one who handles things." I held on to that for years, like it was a compliment. It was a job description. The house came a year later. My mother left it to him because she'd left everything to him, because that's what you do after 34 years when you don't imagine you'll need protection from the man you married. He called me over in the spring of 2020 and slid a folder across the kitchen table. "It's yours," he said. "The house. Your mother would have wanted it. I'll stay on a bit till I'm back on my feet, but the deed goes to you." I cried. I want to be honest about that. I sat at my mother's kitchen table and cried because it felt like the first time in my life he'd chosen me for something. I signed everything he put in front of me. I didn't read it. 28 years old, barely a year out from burying my mother, and a man handing me a house. 3 weeks later, the first payment package arrived. The papers I had signed included an assumption of the existing mortgage, $1,480 a month. They also left the house securing a home equity line opened in 2017 and drawn down to $74,000. I called him. My hands were doing that thing where they won't hold still. He didn't get defensive. That's what I remember. He was patient with me, the way you're patient with a slow child. What did you think I was living on for 3 years, Amber? Air? I said the house was supposed to be a gift. "It is a gift," he said. "It's a gift with a history. Everything real has a history." He stayed in the house. The payments came from me. The same year, he asked to be added to my credit card. I hesitated. I want credit for that. I hesitated for 11 whole seconds, and he said, "You don't have a name to protect." I do. I added him that afternoon. $425 a month on average for more than 3 years. I know because I tracked it. Not out of spite, out of habit. I'm a payroll clerk. I track things. He called on the 1st of every month. Not on my birthday, not at Christmas, not really. The 1st. And I would see the word Dad light up my screen and my chest would go tight, and I told myself for years that the tightness was love. In 2021, I got promoted. Assistant payroll manager. I booked a table at a place in Squirrel Hill with cloth napkins. He canceled 40 minutes before. Something came up with serious people. I sat there anyway and ordered the pasta. I told the server my father was running late. 20 minutes after that, I told her he wasn't coming, and she took the second place, setting away without saying anything. And that was somehow the worst part. Thanksgiving 2022, he introduced me to his neighbor. "This is Amber. She's still figuring out her direction." I was 30 years old. I had 2 jobs. I was paying his mortgage. In the spring of 2023, I passed a certification exam. 11 weeks of studying at the kitchen table after 10-hour days. I photographed the certificate and sent it to him and watched the delivered receipt sit there. And 40 minutes later, he gave it a thumbs up. No words, just the thumb. Let me be precise about the money, because people always think these stories are about feelings. $41,000 a year, before taxes. Take home about $2,600 a month. Out of that, $1,480 for his mortgage, $425 for his card, $210 for the club dues, $2,115 gone before I paid for anything that touched my own body. My second job covered most of the $600 rent and the bus pass. Whatever remained, bought food. I had a bus pass. I did the grocery run at 9 at night when they put the yellow stickers on the meat that turns tomorrow, and I got very good at knowing what was still good on day 2. That was my life on the 18th of October, 2023. That morning, before any of it, he texted me one more time. "If you stop by, wear something decent. These are serious people." For 4 years, I had made myself invisible exactly as he wanted. Only later did I understand why he needed me that way. I got back to the rooming house at 9 that night, and I packed in 40 minutes. I counted what I had. $612. Not $612 a month. $612 total in the world. I walked to Brookline Avenue because I'd used my last transfer. It's about a mile and a half, and it was 34 degrees, and my coat was not a wool coat. The Blue Kettle is a bakery on the corner with a hand-painted sign and a window full of steam. Iris Halloran has owned it since before I was born. 68, widowed, forearms like a longshoreman, and she says maybe 40 words a day. For 2 years I'd been doing her books. For free. It started because I bought a coffee there one morning and saw her adding a supplier invoice on the back of a receipt, and something in me physically could not walk away from it. I knocked on the glass at 10:15 at night with a canvas bag on my shoulder. She let me in. She looked at the bag. She didn't ask. She went behind the counter, took a key off a nail, and set it on the glass between us. "Room upstairs," she said. "Nobody's used it since Frank died." I started to say I couldn't. "You've done my books for 2 years and you've never once asked me for anything." She wiped her hands on her apron. "That's a debt. I don't like debts." That's the whole conversation. All of it. I went up, a bed, a lamp, a chair, a window that looked at a brick wall. The ovens kicked on at 4 in the morning and the whole floor hummed, and I lay there and listened to it. Nobody texted me before dawn. For years, someone always had. He called 31 times in 4 days. I didn't answer. Then he stopped calling, and for about a week I let myself believe that was the end of it. Then he sent a photograph. It was the mortgage statement, my name on it, the balance, the $74,000 on the equity line, sitting there like a tumor. You want to be a stranger? Then be a stranger who owes $74,000. I sat on the floor of that little room and understood the shape of the thing for the first time. I'd walked out, good, brave. But my name was on the deed and my name was on the note, and if I stopped paying, the credit I'd need for anything I ever wanted to build would die with it. He was living in a house I paid for. He was living in it because I paid for it. I'd thought walking out the door was freedom. Freedom, it turns out, has a monthly payment. That winter is a blur of specific things. The 5:40 bus, because the 6:10 got me to my desk at 7:59, and I didn't like cutting it that close. Payroll all day. Then 3 paid sets of books at night, a pizza place, a sandwich shop, and a nail salon. $300 a month each, plus Iris's books in exchange for the room upstairs. I kept a notebook in my coat pocket because my hands got too cold on the walk to use my phone. I ate day-old bread from the Blue Kettle and never once got tired of it. I bought the monthly bus pass instead of single fares because single fares cost 18% more, and 18% of my life was not something I had to give. He sent one message that Christmas. "I hope you think it was worth it." I read it 11 times, and then I put the phone face down and kept working. In December, I found the loaf. I was doing Iris's books, same as always, and I got stuck on a number that wouldn't sit right. The barley loaf? $6, her best seller. 40 of them a day, out the door by noon, every single day for 11 years. I built it out properly: flour, yeast, salt, the water, the electric, on the deck oven at the temperature she runs it, the wrap, the label, and then labor, real labor, because Iris gets up at 3:30 in the morning, and she has never once in her life paid herself for those hours. $6.40. That's what it cost her to make the $6 loaf. 40 cents every loaf. 40 loaves a day. She was losing $16 a day on the thing she was most proud of, and she'd been doing it for 11 years, and nobody had ever told her. I found the problem in one evening and spent the next week fixing it. I'd changed the bake schedule so she ran full sheets instead of half. I called her flour supplier and got a price on a bigger sack because she'd been buying retail like a home baker. And I raised the loaf to $7.50. She fought me on the $7.50 for 4 days. Nobody left, not one customer. They still sold out by noon. The loaf's margin went from -3% to +11% in a single month. She stood at the counter and read the printout twice, then looked up. "Do you know what you just did?" She wasn't smiling. "You pulled the thing that was killing me out of me, and I didn't even know it was in there." I taped the spreadsheet to the walk-in door so she'd see it every morning. I have thought about that piece of paper more than almost anything else in this story. Wendell Broughton drinks his coffee black, and he's there when the doors open, 6 days a week, at the same stool. He's 71. He was a CPA for 40-some years, and he retired in the way that a lot of men retire, which is to say, he didn't. One morning in January, he stood in front of the walk-in door and read my spreadsheet for 4 solid minutes, long enough that I stopped what I was doing and watched him do it. Then he turned around. "What do you charge for this?" "Nothing," I said. "I live upstairs." He looked at me the way you look at somebody who's carrying a piano and doesn't know it's a piano. "Do you know what people pay for that? There's a name for what you did. It's called saving a business." I said something about how it wasn't complicated and how anybody could do it, and he cut me off. "What would you charge," he said, "if you weren't afraid?" I went upstairs that night, and I sat on the bed with a piece of paper, and I wrote a number on it, $850 a month. I looked at it, and I felt sick, physically sick. It felt like a lie I was going to be caught in. With 3 small clients still paying me at night, I gave notice at the payroll job 2 weeks later. I had $2,100 saved. 60 days, maybe 70 if I stopped eating like a person. There's an alley behind the Blue Kettle where the delivery trucks line up before dawn. The bread flour, the produce guy, the linen service, all of them nose to tail in the dark with their engines running. The street sign says Ledger Row. It's been there 100 years. Nobody knows why. I filed the LLC on a Tuesday. $85. Ledger Row. 60 days of cash, 3 underpriced clients, and $1,480 still leaving every month for the house where my father slept. Ellis Darros runs a diner on the South Side. 46, tired, 3rd generation, 6 weeks from listing the place when I met him. I didn't pitch him. I didn't have a pitch. I asked for 3 months of statements and 1 hour of his time. I came back with a single sheet of paper, 4 lines, 4 places the money was walking out of his building. His card processor was on a rate he'd signed in 2015 and never looked at again. He bought his own to-go containers retail. His Sunday brunch, the thing he was proudest of, was staffed for a rush that stopped happening in 2019. And his beer distributor had him on a delivery minimum that forced him to overorder every other week. Not genius, just looking. Ellis read it standing up at the counter with his hand flat on the formica. Then he took a pen from his apron, wrote 850 Mo, Amber Mon on a napkin, signed it, and slid it across. I brought him a proper engagement letter the next morning. I rode the bus home and I cried. And it was not a good cry. because I understood something on that bus. The skill I had spent years undervaluing, the thing my father never once counted as real work, a stranger had just paid for in under an hour. The second client almost ended me. Garrett Pike, a gastropub in Lawrenceville with reclaimed wood and as a cocktail program, and a man who talked with both hands. He paid the first month on time. Then he was traveling. Then his card was being reissued. Then he wanted to bundle it into a quarterly. By late August, the doors were papered over. His number went dead within a week. $4,250. I sat in the alley behind the bakery on an overturned milk crate with the invoices in my lap, and I did not cry. I did something worse. I heard my father's voice saying the thing he'd said to a neighbor at Thanksgiving. She's still figuring out her direction. And for about 90 seconds, I thought he might be right. Then I went upstairs and rewrote my engagement letter. Everybody pays first, in advance. No exceptions, no favors, no persuasive stories. It cost me $4,250 to learn that. I have never paid for anything more useful. In July at Ellis's place, I found a number that wouldn't move. His beef line. Every invoice said 84 pounds. Every packing slip said 84 pounds. And every week his usable yield came in low, and the walk-in was empty 2 days early. The paperwork was clean. That's what stopped me. It was perfectly, beautifully clean. So I quit reading the paperwork and went to the back door. 5:15 in the morning, 3 weeks, a floor scale, Ellis let me expense, a notebook, and a cup of Iris's coffee going cold on the loading dock. The driver hated me. I understood. I would have hated me too. 84 pounds on the slip, 71 on the scale, then 74, then 69. Never the same number twice, never off by enough to trigger an immediate dispute, but always off. And every invoice billed at the top-tier price for a cut 2 grades down. $3,100 a month, 14 months, $43,400 out of a diner 6 weeks from closing. We handled it as a documented vendor dispute. I built a folder, 3 weeks of hand counts, photographs of the scale readout with the date visible, the driver's signature on every slip, and Ellis and I sat down with the supplier's regional manager on a Tuesday morning. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody had to. The man got to page 4 and stopped turning pages. They issued an initial credit in 9 days and settled the full documented amount before the end of the month. They didn't want to lose the account, and they really didn't want the account to talk. Here's the thing about the restaurant business in a city like this. It's a small town wearing a city's clothes. Everybody buys from the same 6 suppliers and drinks at the same 3 bars at 1 in the morning. Within 3 weeks, 5 owners who had heard the story through Ellis and the supplier network called me. They called because I was good enough to leave the paperwork and stand at the back door with a scale. By September, I had 9 clients, and I was doing all of it alone. 4 hours of sleep, a folding table in the corner of my room above the bakery, 16-hour days that started when the ovens did, and I missed a payroll tax deposit for a client, 3 days late. Between the penalty, interest, and the amount I credited back to the client, the mistake cost me $2,300. My engagement letter limited my liability, but I paid the full amount that afternoon from an account that could not absorb it because the client had trusted me to prevent exactly that failure. 3 in the morning, I sat at a table in the dark bakery with a calculator, working out how many months at a payroll clerk's salary it would take to climb back out. Iris came down at 3:30 to start the ovens. She didn't turn on the overhead light. She just went about her business, and after a while she put a barley loaf on the table in front of me, still too hot to touch, and went back to the bench. That was the night I broke and texted him. Did you ever think I'd be good at anything? A little over 3 hours later, he answered at 6:15 in the morning. If you have to ask, you already know. I have never asked him another question about myself. Wendell didn't rescue me. I want to be clear about that because I've heard versions of this story where a kind old man rides in, and that isn't what happened. He gave me 3 things between his coffee and crossword: a 3-tier fee structure, permission to say no, and 1 operating rule: $850 for basic books, $1,400 for full back office, $2,400 for a rescue. You're not a life raft, he told me. You're a compass. Drowning men will pull you under. His final rule was practical. Never take a client I could not reach by bus until I owned a car. I hired Tobias Renner in October for 20 hours a week, 22, second-year accounting, $19 an hour. The first time he called me boss, I had to turn around and face the wall. By the end of that month, 14 clients had pushed Ledger Row past $10,000 in monthly revenue for the first time. I bought new shoes. I'd been gluing the sole of the old ones back on for a year. He was still there. That's the thing people don't understand about this kind of father. He never fully leaves. He just gets quieter and lands harder. Christmas 2024, 1 text. You still doing that little bookkeeping thing? That's all. No marry anything. In January, the gas was shut off at the Brookline house because the utility account in my father's name had gone unpaid. He called me screaming, not asking. Screaming, as though the cold in a house I owned but had never lived in was a thing I had done to him. I let him finish. It took about 4 minutes. Then I said, "I'm not sending it." And I hung up, and I put the phone face down on the table, and I put my forehead on my arms for a minute. Then I went back to work. That same month, the Allegheny Independent Restaurants Guild asked me to speak at their breakfast about food cost. 30 owners in a function room with bad coffee, no slides, 1 sheet of paper. I talked for 22 minutes about how the dish you love the most is usually the one killing you, and how nobody ever checks, and how the number that matters is never the number on the invoice. 5 owners asked for proposals before I left, and all 5 signed within the next 2 weeks. 19 clients in less than a year. I was packing up my folder when a man came over from the back. 60s, nice suit, the kind of handshake that's a little too long. "You're Doug Maughan's daughter, aren't you?" I said I was. He smiled. It was a strange smile. Warm, but careful. The way people are careful around a sad thing they don't want to mention. "He's told us all about you." Then he went to collect his coat. I stood there with a folder of new business and a cold feeling I could not yet explain. I had 19 clients and 4 hours of sleep and a bus to catch. It took me 10 more months to come back to that sentence and ask the right question. Told you what? Nan Prescott called me on a Tuesday in March of 2025. What followed took 5 months. I knew the name of her restaurant before she finished saying it. The Ardmore Chop House was losing $28,000 a month, 6 months from dark. She'd been to 2 banks and a consultant who charged her $9,000 for a slide deck. Ellis Darrow says you're the one I have to call. She had no idea, to Nan Prescott, I wasn't a woman with a history. I was a phone number a diner owner gave her at 1 in the morning. I said I'd come look. I walked in at 10 on a Thursday morning. Empty dining room, chairs upside down on the tables, a vacuum running somewhere in back, sunlight coming in flat and gray through the front glass, the way it does in March. I found myself walking straight toward the window table before I consciously chose it. Same table, same view of the street and the bus shelter across it, and the strip of sidewalk where I'd stood with a coat over my arm. I stood there maybe 4 seconds. "You all right?" Nan said. "I've been here once before," I said. She waited for more. I didn't give her any. I took the job. $2,400 a month. The rescue tier. There was no magic in what I did to that restaurant. I want you to understand that. The suppliers first. Nan had 3 contracts nobody had looked at in 4 years. Produce, linen, protein. I renegotiated all 3. The protein vendor was the same company whose driver I'd caught on a loading dock the summer before. They gave me the number I asked for. They didn't argue. They didn't ask a second question. Then the menu. 31 items. I cut 7. One of them was the A5 Wagyu. It was on there because it looked expensive, and because a certain kind of man likes to see it, and because Nan believed it made the place serious. After food cost and direct labor, she lost $11 every time a tray went out. The trim loss on that cut is brutal, and nobody had ever priced the portion she was serving. $11 out the door every time a man like my father pointed at it. I removed it because the numbers did not work. By then, it was no longer a memory to me. It was simply a bad line. Then the schedule. 3 people on the floor at 4 on a Tuesday, and a hand short at 8 on a Friday. And then the one that hurt her. Her chef appeared to have an undisclosed arrangement with a seafood supplier. The invoices ran about 9% high, consistently, in a way that only shows up when you line up 18 months of them. I didn't accuse anybody. I don't do that. I put the 18 months in a column, handed Nan the column, and left the room. She handled it herself. That's her business. In March, the restaurant was losing $28,000 a month. By August, it was producing roughly $16,000 in monthly operating profit. And Nan Prescott told everybody, every owner, every purveyor, every bartender who'd listen. Not because I asked her to, because that's what this industry is, a rumor with a liquor license. By the end of August 2025, Ledger Row had 22 clients, roughly $338,000 in annual revenue. 3 employees. We'd taken the second floor above a hardware store on the alley itself, which is exactly as sentimental as it sounds, and I don't apologize for it. I set my gross salary at $78,000 a year. I still rode the bus, not out of poverty anymore. I read on the bus, 40 minutes a day, where nobody could reach me. And from my own salary, I was still paying $1,480 a month on the Brookline house where my father slept. 2 years. I'd built a company, and I still hadn't gotten out of the trap he handed me across a kitchen table while I was crying. Two things happened on the same night. At 20 minutes to 6, an email came in from a man named Everett Calloway. His group was buying 2 restaurants in a package deal worth $2.4 million, and they wanted an independent set of eyes on the books before they closed. Somebody outside the deal, somebody with no stake. $19,000 for the engagement. Nan Prescott had given him my name. I read that email 3 times before the name landed. Everett Calloway, silver hair, 60s. The man at the window table who'd looked up and said, "Who's this, Doug?" At 9:15 that same night, my phone rang. Dad. First time in 8 months. And his voice was warm. Not the voice from the utility bill. Not the voice from the restaurant. The old voice, the one from before my mother died. "Sweetheart, I hear you're doing very well." "You hear from who?" "From serious people," he said. He knew about the Calloway engagement. The email had arrived 3.5 hours earlier, and I had told no one. I would later learn that Everett's group had mentioned the engagement to my father because they believed Ledger Row was part of what he was bringing to the deal. It took me a minute to understand what that meant. It took the rest of the night to understand how bad it was. Wendell had known the restaurant and finance crowd in this city for decades, and he never tells you a thing he can't stand behind. I asked him a direct question over coffee in September, and he took a long time answering it. "Your father's underwater," he said. 86,000, near as anybody knows. Club dues, 2 years in arrears, a personal line of credit, and 2 loans, handshake, no paper, from 2 of the men at that Wednesday table. "He's called himself a restaurant finance consultant for 6 years, Wendell said. That's what the card says. And there's no clients, Amber." He turned his cup on the saucer. "Not one. Not a single engagement. 6 years." I sat with that. "He's not a crook." He said it almost gently. "That's what people get wrong about men like that. He's not stealing. He's waiting. 6 years, waiting for somebody to remember who he used to be." I didn't feel triumphant. I want to be honest, because I know what you might be expecting. I felt cold, because a question had opened in my chest and it wouldn't close. If he hadn't earned $1 in 6 years, then for 6 years, what had he been telling them? The Calloway engagement was real work, and I did it properly. Everett gave me the deal folder, the shared drive, everything the buyers had passed back and forth for 8 months. While reviewing the shared drive for a lease abstract, I opened a folder containing the buyers' internal contribution drafts. A list, 5 names, and what each man was bringing. Capital, 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 and the liquor license relationship. Capital. And then, Demon, contribution, operational back office capacity, Ledger Row. I read it 4 times. Ledger Row was listed as his contribution even though he owned no part of it, had invested nothing, and had never entered the office. He couldn't bring money because he didn't have money. So he brought me. He had been carrying my name into rooms for years and setting it on the table whenever he lacked something of his own. He never abandoned me. That's what I understood, sitting there with my hand on the mouse. He had been treating me like an asset he could claim without ever investing in it. I called Everett Calloway on a Thursday morning in October. I didn't accuse him of anything. There was nothing to accuse him of. He'd been polite to me. He'd hired me. He'd stood up at that table 2 years ago and asked a perfectly reasonable question about a woman standing in the doorway with a coat. I asked him one thing, and I kept my voice completely flat because if I hadn't, it would have come out wrong. "Mr. Calloway, before I sign the engagement letter, I need to understand something. What has my father told you he's been doing for the last 6 years? There was a silence on that line that went on for 4 seconds. And when he spoke, he wasn't defensive. He was embarrassed. That's what I heard. A 60-year-old man in a nice office, embarrassed, in front of a woman half his age. Ms. Mon, he told us he was taking care of you. I stood very still in my kitchen. Taking care of me? Everett hesitated. Doug had told them I could not hold a job after my mother died, that he had drained himself supporting me, and that this was why he could never contribute to a deal. For 6 years, they had believed him and stopped asking questions. And then he said the part that took the floor out from under me. He didn't even know he was doing it. That night you brought the coat. We'd just been talking about you. 2 minutes before, he'd finished the whole story. And then you came through the door in a work coat with a folder under your arm, and you looked... He stopped. You looked completely fine, he said, and he stood straight up. It took about 6 seconds, and it rearranged my entire life. For 2 years, I believed my father had thrown me out because I embarrassed him. He had thrown me out because I disproved him. I was not his failure. I was his alibi. The daughter he claimed had consumed every dollar and every opportunity he never actually earned. The moment I walked into that room looking employed, capable, and entirely fine, his story began to collapse. And I had taken 2 buses, 52 minutes, in 34-degree weather. I carried myself to the door of that room and knocked on it with his coat over my arm, like a gift. "Don't come in," he warned me. He gave me the exact instruction that would have kept the lie alive, and when I broke it, he did the only thing left. I sat down on my kitchen floor. I did not cry. The truth settled into me as a kind of stillness, colder than anger. Iris told me about the box on a Sunday. She'd been meaning to for years, and then a bakery gets busy, and 6 years go by. It was in her cellar, under the stairs, behind the flour. My mother had left it there in the fall of 2018 and asked her to keep it. Photographs, mostly. A recipe card, my grandmother's ring, which is worth about $400 and which I will never sell, and a savings passbook in the old style, opened in 2018 in my mother's name, with my father listed as joint owner because she trusted him to hold it for me. $18,000, and a piece of paper folded once, in her handwriting, which I know better than my own. For Amber, when she's ready to start something. Doug will hold it. I called the bank on Monday. The account had been closed in November of 2019, 8 months after we buried her, emptied, all of it. I took the passbook and the note to a lawyer, because my father had been a joint owner and my mother's note was not a formal trust. Any claim would have been expensive, uncertain, and difficult to prove 6 years later. I chose not to pursue it, and because, and this is the true reason, I didn't want it back. I wanted him not to have done it, and there is no court in this country that can give you that. I sat on Iris's cellar stairs for about 20 minutes with the flour dust in the air. Then I took the piece of paper upstairs and I taped it to the wall of my office next to the fee schedule. That was the cruelest part. Not simply that he took it, but that she had trusted him not to. In October, I took 3 practical steps. None of them were dramatic. I sent Everett Calloway a 1-page letter and copied his partners. It said, Ledger Row LLC was solely owned by me, that I was engaged as an independent contractor, and that no other person held any interest, role, or claim in the company. I didn't accuse my father of anything. I didn't have to. I wrote down a true thing in a place where 5 men would read it. Then I asked Nan Prescott for one favor, host the closing dinner at the Ardmore and seat me where the numbers get presented. She said yes before I finished the sentence. To Nan Prescott, I was the reason her doors were still open, and hosting the dinner was an easy favor to grant. And then I did my job. Line by line, honestly, the way I'd do it for a diner on the South Side. An honest review finds what an honest review finds. I printed something. I put it in a plain gray folder. Nobody saw it. Not Wendell, not Tobias, not Iris. He came to the office in the last week of October. He'd never been, not once in 20 months. He stood in the doorway and looked at the sign on the glass. He looked at Tobias and the girl we'd hired in June, and the third desk by the window. He looked at the fee schedule on the wall, and he did not look at the piece of paper taped next to it, because he had no reason to think a piece of paper on a wall could mean anything. He nodded slowly, the way a man nods when he's inspecting an investment that's finally coming along. "Good," he said. "This is exactly what I told them you were building." Then he smiled at me. "For us." He came back on the 4th of November, and he sat down in my office before I offered him a chair. He'd dressed for it, a suit I didn't recognize, and I thought, distantly, that's on credit. He laid it out like a business proposal, because in his mind it was one. At the closing dinner, I would present, and when I presented, I would introduce Ledger Row as the operations arm of Mon Advisory. That's the company on his card. It has never had an address, an employee, or a client. Then I would sign documents transferring 40% of Ledger Row to him. "You'd still run it," he said. "Day to day. Nothing changes for you." I asked him why he thought I would do that. And here is where he told me the truth, and I don't think he ever knew he had. "Because you had your mother," he said. He said it without heat, reasonably, the way you'd explain arithmetic. "You had her, and I had a name. You got to spend 6 years being nobody, and it cost you nothing. It cost me everything." I let that sit. "They invest in a man, Amber, not a bookkeeper who rides the bus." And then, because he could feel the room, he reached for the 2 things he had left. "I'll tell the guild you built Ledger Row from contacts and work you took from Mon Advisory. I've been in this town 40 years. Who do you think they'll believe? And, you want to sell that house? Try showing it while I'm still living there." Deadline: Wednesday, November 19th, 7 o'clock, the Ardmore Chop House. He picked it on purpose. He wanted me to walk into that room again and feel what I felt the last time. I let the silence go about 7 seconds. Then I said, "I'll be there at 7. He stood up. At the door, he turned around, and he looked me over. The office, the desk, the woman in it. "Wear something decent," he said. Ellis Darros called me on a Thursday and started the way people do when they think they're wasting your time. "This is probably nothing. I was cleaning out the old email account." He forwarded it to me while we were on the phone. January 2024. Before Ledger Row existed. From Douglas Mon Advisory. A cold pitch. Restaurant financial consulting. Available for select engagements. And at the bottom, an attachment, because a man selling a service needs to show you the service. It was a photograph, taken on a phone, slightly crooked. A spreadsheet taped to the door of a walk-in cooler. The barley loaf, $6, $6.40. My handwriting in the margin. A sample of my work. He had come by the bakery that winter. He'd stood in Iris Halloran's kitchen for 4 minutes, waiting on a coffee, and he'd taken out his phone, and he'd photographed the only piece of my thinking that had ever been visible in a public place. Then he'd tried to sell it. He didn't understand a single number on it. He couldn't have explained one line of it if you'd paid him. He just knew it looked like the kind of thing a man in his story was supposed to have. He had tried to sell my work before I had learned to charge for it myself. That's the part I couldn't get past. Not the theft, the timing. He didn't start using me when I became valuable. He'd been using me the whole time. The contempt and the appropriation were never two things. They were one thing, and they always had been. Abishir? I made 4 folders, 1 page each, one for every man at that table except my father. No lawyer, no filings, nobody in a suit standing behind me with his hands folded. I want that on the record, because the fantasy people have about this kind of night always involves a lawyer, and mine didn't. Just true things, in order, in a room where they couldn't be unheard. Tobias prepared a redacted portfolio listing 22 restaurant clients, supported by written permission from the owners whose names appeared. I asked Iris to come. She said, "What do I wear?" I said, "Whatever you want." On the 18th, I took the coat to the dry cleaner on Brookline Avenue. It had hung in my closet for 2 years, still smelling faintly of him, and I had never managed to throw it away. When I picked it up, I slipped the old restaurant receipt into the breast pocket myself. The night before, I sat in the dark bakery at 10 o'clock and Iris baked me a barley loaf. $7.50 now. Still sells out by noon. We didn't talk much. She's not a talker, and I wasn't either that night. I read my mother's note again. I keep a photograph of it on my phone. Doug will hold it. For 25 months, I had been trying to prove my father wrong about me. Sitting there with the flour in the air and the ovens ticking as they cooled, I finally understood what I'd gotten backwards. He was never wrong about me. He lied about me. Success could not correct a lie he intended to keep rewriting. I could have built 10 companies, and he would have claimed everyone. A lie like that required witnesses. He got there first. Of course he did. 20 minutes early, in the new suit. I watched him through the front glass from the bus shelter across the street because I wanted to see this from the outside first. He shook every hand at that table. He put his hand on Everett Calloway's shoulder. He was hosting, in a restaurant he didn't own, at a deal he hadn't funded. And then he said something I could read from 30 feet away, because I'd heard it my whole life. My daughter is going to walk us through it. Us. The first thing that was wrong was the table. The table was set for 6. At the presentation seat, Nan had placed a small folded card. He picked it up. He read it. He read it again. Ledger Row LLC, A. Morgan, Principal Not Morgan Advisory. He put it back down, and he laughed, and he said something about how they'd printed it wrong. I came in through the front. The outer door was not locked. Nan Prescott held it open herself, and she walked me across her dining room, past that window table, in front of 5 men, with her hand on my arm. "Amber, thank you for coming." Then she turned to the table. "Gentlemen, this is the woman who is the reason this restaurant is still open." Everett Calloway stood up. He put out his hand to me. "First, before my father, And Iris Halloran, 68 years old, in a good coat, sat down at the next table and ordered a pot of tea. I did my job. I opened the folder and I gave them what they had paid me $19,000 for, and I did it the way I would have done it for anybody. The second property, the one on the north side, the one the deal was built on, had overstated reported annual revenue by roughly $310,000. Two mechanisms. Catering revenue was being booked twice, once at deposit, once at delivery, and the full value of unredeemed gift cards was being recognized as revenue on the day of sale without any deferred liability or breakage analysis. I put down 3 exhibits: the reconciliation, redacted bank activity, and the point-of-sale export. The reported revenue could not be reconciled to the underlying transactions. "My recommendation is that you do not buy at this price," I said. "That's what I was hired to say." And I stopped. My father had his hand flat on the tablecloth. Everett Calloway didn't look at him. He looked at me. "No, Ms. Mon, there's one more thing." He put his glasses back on. "Who brought us that property?" And I looked at my father. I gave him 3 full seconds. I want that in the record, too. 3 seconds, at a table, in front of the only men whose opinion he has ever cared about, to say it himself. He didn't. So I opened the gray folder. The sellers group had paid a finder's fee, $12,000, in March, to Mon Advisory, while he sat on the buyer's side of the table. I did not know whether it crossed a criminal line. It did not need to. An undisclosed payment from the seller while he sat with the buyers was enough to end his credibility in that room. I had not been hired to determine his civil liability, and nobody at that table needed a lawsuit before deciding what the payment meant. In a restaurant town this size, it was the end. Then Everett asked the second question, and his voice had gone very quiet. "And what is your father's role in your company?" I answered him without raising my voice at all. "My father has never worked at Ledger Row. He has never invested $1 in it. He has never seen my books." And then I looked at the man who raised me. "For 6 years, he has been telling you he was taking care of me. I brought 6 years of redacted statements showing every payment that moved from me to him." I put my hand flat on the folder. "Would you like to see them, Dad?" Nobody shouted. That's what I remember most. It was so quiet. 2 of the men at the table stopped looking at him. One physically turned his chair so that his shoulders stood between them. The third man looked at his plate. Everett Calloway took his glasses off and folded them and said one word. "Doug." That was all. 1 syllable, and it held 6 years in it. My father's mouth moved. Nothing came out of it. His hand was still flat on the tablecloth, and the tablecloth was creased under it. I stood up. I'd thought about this. I had 1 sentence, and I'd been carrying it for 3 weeks. "You didn't raise a poor loser, Dad." The room was completely still. "You just needed one." I picked up the coat from the back of my chair. Charcoal wool, $1,900 bonus, boxed noodles for 2 weeks, 26 years old and so proud of myself, dry cleaned, pressed, folded square, and I laid it on the empty chair beside him. Same coat, same chair, same restaurant, 25 months. In the breast pocket was the itemized check the restaurant had mailed to the cardholder address after his payment failed. October 18th, 2023. $1,216. The account he had expected me to cover. "That one's yours too," I said. And I walked out through the front door, the same door I'd been thrown out of. And this time nobody said a word. He came to the bakery 3 days later, not the office, the bakery. He knew I'd be softer there, and he was a little bit right, and I hate that. He looked smaller. He wasn't wearing the wool coat. He never wore it again as far as I know. Iris was at the bench in the back, with her hands in a bowl. She didn't leave. She didn't look up either. She just stayed, working 10 feet away. And I have never in my life been more grateful for a person's back. "I made a mistake," he said. And there it was, the word he'd been carrying up the street. "No," I said. "You made a decision." He started to say something. "Then you kept choosing it," I said. "Month after month for 6 years. He asked for money. Not a lot, the way he framed it. Enough to get the club current. Enough to get his feet under him. I said no. Then he asked me to talk to Everett. To correct it, he said. To say it had gotten out of hand, that there'd been a misunderstanding between a father and a daughter, that families say things. I said no. And then I asked him the question I'd been carrying since I was about 17 years old, and I asked it quietly, because it turns out you don't shout that kind of thing. "Did you ever tell anyone you were proud of me? One time, to anybody?" He opened his mouth, and he stood in a bakery on Brookline Avenue with the ovens going, and he didn't say anything. That was the answer. I waited 15 years to hear it, and it wasn't a sentence. "You can call me," I said. He looked up. "I'll answer. I'm not going to erase you from my life and pretend that solves anything." I put my hands in my pockets. "But I'm not sending money, and I'm not fixing the story. I'm done being the reason you get to be the man you said you were." I listed the house before the end of November. Under the written occupancy notice, he had 30 days to leave. By December, I had accepted an offer. After the mortgage, the $74,000 equity line, realtor fees, and closing costs, the projected remainder was about $9,000. When the sale closes, that remainder will go into a savings account named for the one my mother intended for me, for when they're ready. It's December now. Ledger Row has 29 clients and 5 people. Tobias is sitting for the CPA exam in the spring, and Wendell Broughton comes in every Saturday morning to walk him through it, and he will not take $1 for it, and we've stopped offering. Each year, we reserve 2 short-term rescue engagements for businesses that cannot afford us. I pick them myself. Little places, bleeding, run by somebody who doesn't know yet what's killing them. I don't make a thing of it. I just do the books until it stops. That's how I got a room upstairs from a woman who wouldn't say why. I see a therapist on Thursdays. I've been going 11 months. Mostly what we work on is that when a person compliments me, it slides off. It doesn't get in. She says that part of me learned not to receive praise a long time ago, and it will take time to relearn. I still ride the bus, 40 minutes a day. I read. My father sent me a 4-sentence text in late November. It was an apology, and I think it might even have been a real one. I read it twice. I didn't delete it. I didn't answer it either. Some apologies are just the last invoice. Nan Prescott seated me at the window table on a Tuesday night in December. That table. She does it on purpose now, and she's never once said so, and I've never once asked her to stop. I hung my coat on the hook beside it. My coat. Nobody told me not to come in. I ordered what I wanted. I ate by myself, and it wasn't lonely, and I'd like you to understand that those are two different things, and it took me 33 years to learn it. It started snowing around 8. Across the street, the number 12 pulled up to the shelter, and the doors opened, and nobody got off, and it went on down the hill. I never needed him to tell me I was worth something. I'd already written it down. One column, in my own hand, and it added up. If someone once needed you small, tell me about the day you stopped carrying that role for them. Not the day you won. The day you stopped.